Welcome to the Studio Archive podcast. My name is Ryan Armstrong. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks for watching on YouTube, if that's where you're at. Thanks for listening on Spotify or Apple Music or anywhere else. I appreciate you tuning in. Looking forward to today's interview. We'll get into that in a second. But this podcast is for producers and composers and songwriters, those music creators looking to get better at what you do. I created this podcast because I wanted to learn from the composers and producers that I look up to. And so hopefully you can learn something and get some inspiration out of these conversations. And hopefully we can help each other out, learn from each other. So that'd be cool. If you're getting started and you're brand new at this thing in music production, I've got a cheat sheet for you. One of the biggest questions I get asked is, how do I get started? What kind of gear do I need? What should I buy for my first couple plugins? So I have a free cheat sheet for you. You can download with just that, some plugin recommendations if you're just getting started, virtual instruments, some gear, that kind of stuff. So you can download that for free at thestudioarchive.com/cheat sheet. That's thestudioarchive.com/cheat sheet. So make sure you grab that. It's free. So today's interview is with Josh Leake. He's from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He makes instrumental music under his name, Josh Leake, as well as electronic pop under the name Evening Traveler. Both genres of music that he creates is super good. So make sure you check him out and listen to his music. It's super good. And I'm super excited for this interview. We talk about sync licensing and his involvement with Artlist and how he works music into his schedule and all sorts of different things. So let's get into it. This is my interview with Josh Leake. Well, Josh, thanks so much for being on the show. Really appreciate you taking the time. I know you have a new baby, so congrats on that.
Thank you.
I'm sure your schedule's a little bit out of whack right now.
Yeah, I actually have. So I have Fridays off. Music is like my side job. So I work full time at a church, and Fridays are my day off. So it's actually not too crazy of a day, actually.
Okay, right on. Cool. What church do you work at?
So it's a church called Allison Park Church. I grew up here, so I've lived in Pittsburgh my whole life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. I'm an audio engineer at a church right across the border here. We're in Idaho.
No way.
That's my day job. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, sweet. So why don't we get started by just tell us a little about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and how you got into music.
Yeah. So again, my name's Josh. I was born and raised here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a couple minutes, 20 minutes outside the city. And, I grew up at Allison Park Church, and that's sort of where I got my start in music too. So I started taking piano lessons when I was 6. When I was in my teenage years, I stopped. I did a lot of classical music, but I stopped being as interested in that, and just sort of wanted to play pop stuff. And what I was, pop punk music is what I was really into. And then the way that I really got started was, when I was at my church, specifically the youth group. I was learning drums, and I was terrible. And the drummer was from Africa, and he went back to Africa, and they needed a drummer, and they were willing to take literally anybody. So I hopped in. And then it was the same thing with guitar. They lost their guitarist, and I had been watching YouTube videos, so I knew a little bit about guitar. That's like how I sort of got my very initial start, just doing music stuff at all. And then, I started recording. I recorded my first album when I was in 11th grade on like an iMac. That was all I had, was just an iMac and GarageBand. And it was like, there's like a mic, the built-in microphone on top of it. That's how I recorded the vocals and the guitar. And it was just like MIDI piano. That was it. And I was so pumped about it. So that was like my first thing. And then, in college, I got into Reason by, they're not Propeller Head anymore. I don't know what the company name is, but and now, around, I think when I graduated college, it was around 2014. And I started using Logic, and then I started really getting into, I had a friend who did a lot of video work. And so I started producing music for his videos, and then, found out I really like doing scoring and soundtrack stuff. And the rest is history from there.
Yeah. Awesome. So how often are you writing with the full-time job, and then like trying to make side time on the side to do this stuff? How often are you able to do that? Do you stick to some kind of like schedule? Because you seem to be releasing quite a bit of music.
I would love to say that I am very disciplined about releasing on schedule, but I'm not always. So I try to be disciplined to do at least a couple times a week, get in the studio and work on something, even if I don't necessarily feel the best about it, just for the discipline of being in it. I'm not always really great about that, especially with having a new baby. That makes it a little bit difficult. But yeah, I would say like my goal is to release, I would love to be in a rhythm where I'm releasing something once a month, but I haven't really ever been able to do that. My goal is just to release, 2 or 3 projects a year. And if I'm not hitting that, usually I'm like, oh man. So I usually find time to do at least that, to make time for 2 or 3 projects a year. And then to make time to really sink in and promote those. And with my limited marketing knowledge, network and make community and do that kind of thing. So yeah, that's generally what I try to do.
Sure. Okay. So you release music under basically 2 names, like your own name, you have the instrumental stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also do electronic pop under
Yep.
Evening Traveler.
Yep.
So did you start with the instrumental and then you kind of moved into the Evening Traveler and doing
Yeah.
something different?
Yeah, it's actually interesting how it all developed. So I, like I said, when I did my album back in high school, it was all lyrics. And that was like what I really wanted to do. And then I had some people that I was close with basically tell me like, hey, you should just not sing on your stuff. So I was like, okay, got it. Cause I knew like I'm not the best singer. I've worked on it a lot over the years, but even 5 years ago, I was a much different singer than I am now. And so that's when I leaned really heavily away from writing lyrics and just went all into instrumental. And I had a couple of role models that really inspired me to do that. And so, for a while, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I would say like around 2015, it was all under one. So I was doing some electronic pop, maybe not necessarily with lyrics, some that was like, it was just basically every style. And I didn't know kind of really what I wanted to do. And then I sort of decided, okay, I'm going to split into these 2 things and I'll do all electronic pop. So instrumental, I would say, is like what I tend to gravitate towards and probably what I'm most naturally good at. But I really like doing stuff with lyrics, especially, I've been working on getting better at songwriting and on my voice to where I feel comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I mean, you sound good in all this and what
Thanks, man.
I've listened to. So, so you have, I found some of your stuff on Artlist,
Mm-hmm.
which I think, at least I saw your instrumental stuff. I'm not sure if you have the Evening Traveler on there.
Yep.
But how is that getting set up with them, and how's that process been working with them?
Yeah, it's been amazing actually because so 2015 is when I started working on anything at all, soundtrack wise. A friend at my church was, doing a lot of video content for a lot of different people. And so I was just making stuff for him for free all the time. And then he, sort of recommended that to me. And I really didn't want to get on it at the time because I was terrified of rejection. I still don't know that I'm great at handling it, but I stayed away from submitting to any of these places at the time. And so eventually I was like, you know what, I'll try this out. They were just I think they were in their beta at the time, or they were just launching. And that's right when I submitted and I got on. And so it was like they were one of the first people to do like the subscription model, from what I know, of like, you pay and you can download as much as you want for a whatever flat fee.
Mm.
And that sort of, caused them to skyrocket. So I got on right at the right time, and it's been awesome. Like right when that happened actually is when we had our first kid. And so, I remember, when I got the first email from them, when they said, hey, here's how much you're on track to make. At that time, my wife was still working because, I worked at a church. I didn't make a ton of money, and she was, had like an administrator job. And so we were doing fine, but we didn't have a ton of extra. And so my goal was to make enough money from music eventually to be able to let her be a full-time mom. And she thought that was a pipe dream. Cause everybody says there's no money in music, and I get that that's generally the case. But I remember the morning that I woke up and got the email, and they were like, hey, here's how much you're projected to make. And we were like jumping around the room. We were like, yes, we can do it. You can be a full-time mom. And, so that was really exciting. I've loved working with them, over the years. I think they're a great platform.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I've always been curious. So I don't have any of my music on any libraries, and honestly, like I come from more of like the mixing side, fairly
Okay.
new to like producing and writing. But I'm like my hope is to get some music on something like Artlist
That's
or
awesome.
one of these libraries. So I don't have anything like that right now. But I've always wondered like how with this like kind of sync licensing thing, like how feasible is it for producers and composers to make a living doing just that?
Yeah. Well, more realistic than I would have said 5 years ago because, you know, I was determined. So and I was telling my wife this. I was like, I'm gonna make money from music. I don't know how, but I'm determined. Like I'm going to make this on the side so that you can stay home and take care of our kids. And we always laugh about this because she's just not musical at all. And so like every time I would show her one of my songs, she would just sort of nod her head and be like, oh, and I didn't find out until later. She was, until I started making any money, she was like, I didn't even know you were good at music. I just thought you like really enjoyed it. And I was like, so I had to like prove myself to her.
That's awesome.
Um, but anyway, yeah, I think like once I started getting determined in that way where I was like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I found a lot of other people in the community of like composers and people who were doing that kind of thing who were into the sync licensing world. And so I started messaging them and I was finding out like, oh my gosh, these, some of them are going full time and they've hit it big and they're making tons of money. But I mean, there's people who are just, maybe not like the biggest names in the world that are making more than enough for like to make a living off of it. And so I can't speak for obviously every site and everything, but my experience, which again, I am definitely somewhat lucky getting on Artlist when I did and all of that stuff. My experience has been very, very pleasantly surprised with the world of sync licensing. So, I think it's finding the right platform. I think it's finding the right connections and, getting the right audience for your stuff. But I think it's way more doable than I would have thought.
Yeah, that's awesome. So going back to Evening Traveler, you did just release a new EP, Finding Out As I Go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How was the process for that? Was that something that I feel like maybe on your Instagram, I saw something about one of those songs. This could be a totally different song. That's not that EP, but one that like came together super fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually was one of these.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So yeah, I started working on these two at the end of 2020, which was, in that post, I also talked about like 2020 last year. I mean, I know for everybody, last year was just not the best year. It was kind of awful, but I also just had a couple of really bad experiences, especially with some artists. There was one particular artist that I really looked up to that I had a very disheartening and discouraging reaction to, interaction. That's the word I'm looking. Interaction with, and so at the end of the year, I hadn't really made anything, and so when I finally did decide to sit down and work on this song, Finding Out As I Go, I sat down and I had a conversation with one of my other friends, who's a composer, and he just talked me through some of what I was feeling, and I was like, I'm gonna work on something new, and writing the lyrics and producing the music, all of that just came unnaturally quick because I think it was just like me raw processing everything that I had been through that year. And so I sat down like a late November night and pretty much like, I don't know, 7 o'clock in the evening until like 3 o'clock in the morning, just like cranked it out. And then I wrapped up the rest of it the next day. But yeah, that was a very, I don't know what the word cathartic, I don't know if that's the right word, experience for me to just like, sometimes you have to grind out a song and it takes a while to get it. But this was just one of those ones that was like very personal and like a moving on moment for me. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, now it's coming back to me. That was Finding Out As I Go, the song, right?
Yeah.
That you're talking
Yep.
about. Cool.
That was
yeah.
it.
Cool. So what are some of your inspirations, like musically, or some of these? What did you listen to anything that got you like really into the cinematic stuff?
Yeah.
I know for me,
what?
like there was like one song that I heard that's just like set it off for me, and so I'm just like curious how you got interested in that.
Yeah. Man, that's how it was for me too. I remember there was I don't know, it was right before I left college. I heard an instrumental track and I had never heard anything like it. I don't even remember what it was anymore, but I remember hearing it underneath this video and it made me so emotional and I connected with it on a level that I like I was like, I've never connected with anything instrumentally in this way before ever. And so I went back and just started searching for similar artists, and man, I wish I could think of some of them. Like I know one of the big ones was Helios and Keith Kenneth. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his stuff. He's
Helios sounds
fantastic.
familiar.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So there's a couple of guys, and I wish I could remember all of their names. I know there was another one, Chris something. Oh man, it's gonna kill me. Jordan Kritz, that's one of them. His
Oh
stuff is
yeah,
really
yeah.
good.
Oh
Yeah.
dude, yeah. I just found his stuff. I don't know, maybe not even a year ago, and it's so
Oh
good,
yeah, he's
so good. Yeah,
fantastic. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So Jordan Kritz, there's a guy named Rory, Roary.
yeah.
I
Okay.
love his stuff, and so like I think one of the ways that I did that was I went on Music Bed, which is another licensing
Yeah,
site, and I just started like listening to the top tracks on there, and was just blown away. And I was like, my gosh, like this is, yeah, it was just like, it was like a new world was opened for me. When I started to hear, another one is Nick Box. He has another, so he has Nick Box, which is like his solo, I don't know, like quieter stuff. And then he has a more upbeat project called Airplanes, and all of his stuff is
yeah,
so good. So yeah, those were some of the people that I would say kickstarted things for sure.
yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I remember. I used to play in a band, and we were like in the van on the way home, and I don't know if I was listening on Spotify or what, but a Ryan Talbert song came on, and I was just
I
like,
know. Yeah, I
I was
forgot
like
about him.
blown away. I was like, holy crap, this is incredible music. It was
Yeah,
just instrumental. And it's like
yeah,
that
he's
one
nuts.
song just like made me dive into this whole like
Yeah,
cinematic world, and then finding other people. And it's just like, wow, it was so good. And I love his stuff.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. That's always such a refreshing thing to me that I probably don't make enough time for, is like just sitting down and sifting through stuff for a long
Mhm.
period of time, because that like, yeah, like even like I remember when I found Ryan Talbert too, like it was just like I was so motivated. You know what I mean? Just like
Yeah.
connecting with something in that way is a really exciting feeling that it's not always fun to sit down and to take time to go through things. I don't know. I sometimes don't have the discipline to do that, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So I'm curious, I'm always curious about like what kind of virtual instruments, plugins, and stuff people are using. Cause I mean, that's one of the things that I love about instrumental music is like the sounds, and especially like when I listen to Ryan Talbert or somebody, or even your stuff, I'm like, man, where'd that sound come from? Like that sounds so good. So
Yeah.
what are some of your like kind of go-to instruments that you use? I know you do some like actual recording,
Hmm.
but a lot of in the box stuff. So
Right.
what are you using that
Yeah,
you love?
man. So um, I think the main things. So I started with native instruments. Like when I first decided, okay, I'm going to get into composing and doing soundtracks and stuff. Native instruments package complete. It was like $500. And I had to I had to convince my wife for like a couple weeks, like this is worth it and it's going to pay off. And I wasn't even totally sure. I was like, I think it's going to pay off, and now I'm really glad. But so that was like, and I still use their stuff all the time. So they're different pianos. They have a ton now. So um, I always pronounce their piano names wrong. The Grandeur, I don't know how to
Oh
Grandeur.
yeah,
I
I'm
don't
not
know,
sure how
whatever
to
that one
say
is.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, they have three different: the Maverick, the Gentleman, the Grandeur, and then they have Una Corda, which I love Una Corda to death. As the one thing I geek out over constantly is piano samples. I feel like I can't
Oh,
ever
okay.
get enough piano
Yeah.
samples. What was I saying? Okay, yeah. So that. I think that's a lot of the big stuff. Is always going back to native instruments packages. And then Omnisphere is fantastic. It's very pricey, but it's really really great. Are you familiar with Omnisphere?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
I don't have
yeah.
it, but yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of when you first get it, it's like so many weird sounds that you're like, I don't even know how I would ever find use for this. But you know, one of the things that I feel like I've learned, or I feel like that I appreciate more, is like layering, as much as possible. And so that's something that Omnisphere is really great for, is finding a bunch of really interesting different sounds and layering them together. So I would say Omnisphere is almost always a staple of what I do. What else? For recording guitars, um, I I hope no one ever knows that I just go straight into my interface. I don't have an amp or anything. I used to have an amp and then I sold it, and so I sort of do almost everything in the box. Like I do some recording that's with a mic or real instruments or things like that. But most stuff is in the box. So, I go into my interface and I do Guitar Rig, which is a Native Instruments thing. I do all
Okay.
my guitar work in there. I love Guitar Rig. Again, I'm always a little bit nervous that real guitarists, because I don't know if I really consider myself a real guitarist. Like the purists of tone will hear my stuff and be like, he's not using the real stuff. But
No, that sounds good. I'm a
yeah.
guitarist. That's my main
Okay.
instrument. I didn't hear anything weird. Like, your guitar stuff sounds
That
good.
is
And I've never
that's
used Guitar
encouraging.
Rig.
Okay.
I use, because that's funny. I have analog stuff, not a ton. I have like one AC-15 for an amp,
Okay.
which I
Yeah.
usually just would like mic it up. But like
Gotcha.
lately I've been pretty much only modeling, like
Yeah.
mostly probably because it's so convenient. I can just plug into the interface,
That's
have some
exactly.
presets to start with, and it makes it so easy. So
Yes.
my
Yeah.
amp
I
mostly just
actually,
like sits here.
yeah, I had an AC-15 too a couple years ago. That's what I
Okay.
had, and then before we had any money, I had to sell it so we had some extra money around. But yeah, just have a quarter inch sitting right by my desk, and it definitely is the convenience of just like when inspiration hits, I do that, and then by the time I listen back later, I'm like, yeah, I'm happy with that. How that sounds.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you do anything in your chain like beyond what Guitar Rig has to kind of like give it more of an analog sound, try to keep it sounding from being like a modeled instrument?
Not really, honestly.
Well,
Like
that's good. That's good.
yeah, yeah. So there was a period of time where like I was really, so I played guitar at my church for a while, and I bought my AC-15, and I was really into trying to get better at tone. And then when I sold the amp, I was like, I'm gonna try to figure out how to do this. But honestly, with Guitar Rig, most of the time I end up hearing it, I'm like, this sounds really good. And any of the tricks to go further beyond that, I'm not super familiar with. So, yeah. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention that I forgot that I use constantly is the website Splice. I know everybody talks about
Oh,
this
okay.
now. Splice is, man, and anybody that's not using it, I'm like, you have to use it, because at least for me, it changed the way that I make music. And, like especially drum samples. Drums are just like so easy to feel stale, and like
Yeah.
it's hard to sift through things that you're really happy with. You're just sort of like, yeah, I'll use that. But being able to just like find hundreds and thousands of drum samples, and drum samples especially, Splice has been a game changer for me. So yeah, those are the big things.
Sweet. Okay. Yeah, I haven't used Splice in a while. But that's actually one thing that I did notice on some of your things, that the drums, whatever samples you're using, like they sound great. And they always seem to like fit what you're doing really well, which I
That's
love.
awesome to hear.
I
I
and I'm
appreciate
always
that.
super curious about drum stuff too, because it is so hard to, I mean, there's samples all over the place now,
Sure.
but it's
Yep.
still so hard to just make it feel good, especially if, at least for me, and like trying to program anything, I'm always like, it's like the samples themselves are good, but for some reason I can't get it to feel real enough or something.
Yeah, to feel
So I'm
organic.
always like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm always curious about, and actually I listened to one of your songs. I wish I remember what it was now. I think like towards the end, it was on Art List. Drums came in and it sounded like you recorded a kit. Did you ever record a kit, or were those most likely?
I have never recorded a kit.
Dude.
Yeah, I've
Yes, that
always.
sounded really good. I was like, dang.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I've always, and I will at some point record, because I play drums a little bit, enough to get by, and I have a friend who's absolutely fantastic, and it's always been the convenience thing of, I'm like, yeah, this sounds fine. So, yeah, that probably what that was either like a drum sample from Splice that I chopped up, or just a bunch of individual samples. That's something that I feel like I'm really happy with where I've gotten to over the years, is getting those to feel more organic. And again, I think, a lot of that just comes from like figuring out how to layer, and how to like EQ and reverb in a way that I'm happy with,
Yeah.
to where it doesn't feel super computerized. Because that's what I struggled with for years and years and years, was like everything sounded so robotic and computerized and didn't feel natural. And so, finding, well, I guess two things. One, finding I want that sound.com. Are you familiar
Oh
with
yeah.
their
Yep.
stuff?
I have a bunch of
Yeah,
their
that
samples.
was, yeah. So that was like the first game changer for me, where I was like, the first good drum samples ever. Like I was so pumped about finding those, and then finding Splice and just being able to put all of that together has helped a lot with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, now I'm remembering it was First and Last that I heard.
Okay.
that had the drums at the end.
Yeah.
And it
Well,
was really convincing. I was like, man, it really sounds like he recorded a kit, but I had this feeling that you didn't, but it sounded like you did.
yeah.
So it was great.
That's really encouraging to hear. Honestly, I still listen back to that one. Anything, that was from what I think 2016 is when I released that. And anything from that era, I still get a little bit like, I hope people don't listen to that. And because, that's when I first started to get on Artlist in these different places. And I was like, I hope this is good. And now I listen back and I can hear the difference from where I am now to where that is. And so I'm like, oh, I wish I had done this. And so it's encouraging to hear that, because that one was all, that one was, I don't even know what that, I wasn't using Splice at that point. That was just like stuff that was in Logic, and I want that sound stuff and a lot of layering and some, I just experimented with that for a while.
And if I remember right, that had a pretty like saturated sound, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Which I love. I just love like blown out drums like that sometimes.
Yeah, me too.
So what do you have for advice for other composers, producers who want to be doing what you're doing, writing instrumental stuff, trying to get into it? You have any advice for them?
Yeah, I would say a couple things. So the first thing I would say is like being disciplined about doing it every day. So this coming from a guy who I don't do this every day now. There was a period of time where I was incredibly disciplined about making music every day, even if I wasn't happy with it, just for the sake of creating. Even if it was, I would spend 10 minutes and I would come up with an idea and I would just save that and leave. At least I did something, because, I could come back the next day and I would hear what I worked on and be like, oh, you know what? I can take that somewhere. So if you're serious about wanting to get to the place where you can make money and, be used for things, I think just being in the discipline of creating, and you also learn a lot by just doing that. By creating every day, you get better at some of the procedural and the logistics of EQ and compression and learning all that stuff. The second thing I would say is that I think was a huge help to me was like, take every opportunity you can get. That was so critical for me early on, was just like, I think sometimes we can be so focused on the end goal of where we want to be that we aren't happy unless we just arrive there. But like, I was like, I am going to work for free until my stuff gets enough attention that, I can start doing whatever. And so I got a lot of different opportunities that way that helped me learn to get to where I am. So another thing is, I think like being in a community, at least online, of just like finding a lot of different artists who are doing the same thing as you, or who are doing what you want to do. That was actually huge. Like I said, like finding people like Jordan Kritz who were like way better than me. And I was like, if I could get to where they are, I would be pumped out of my mind, because like I love what they're doing, and I know they're making money from what they're doing. And so I would find these people, I would follow their stuff, I would comment on their stuff, I would message them, and I would ask them questions. And that was so helpful for me early on, was just like finding people who had done realistically what I wanted to do. Honestly, I think that's one of the hard things about music sometimes, is like we dream about where we want to be, but sometimes those are things that no one else has really done, or people have gotten extremely lucky, or, so just finding like, okay, what realistically have other people done out there that aren't like mega superstars, and how did they get there? So honestly, that was one of the most helpful tips that I got early on, was just being in and then, when you do that too, you also get like, people will listen to your stuff and they'll give you feedback, and you get a sort of constant source of inspiration where you're comparing your stuff in a healthy way. And so, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. So it sounds like when you reach out to people, like they're pretty responsive for the most part.
Yeah, I would say for the most part, there's always some people that are just not active or are too busy.
Back from.
But yeah.
No, that's excellent advice. I love it. I wanted to ask, are you mixing your own stuff then? Mixing and mastering?
Yep. Yeah. So I haven't mixed, or I haven't mastered all of my stuff. So, a couple of my albums back in, maybe 3 years ago, some of that stuff was mastered by one of my friends. But I've enjoyed learning more. I'm not a super great masterer, but I enjoy the process of it and learning about it. So yeah, I mix and master my stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it sounds great. What was
Thanks, man.
what's your process in that? Do you kind of mix as you go as you're writing, or do you just write it, get it all down, then you got some stems to work with and you mix it from there? What's your process with that? Just curious.
Yeah. So I have tried several times to do it what I think a lot of people consider the right way, which is you finish it and then you bounce the stems and you mix it, which is like, I know that there's a lot of benefits. Again, for me, it's like the convenience thing of like, I know that if I'm not happy with it as I'm going and seeing like, it's starting to punch harder and it's like filling out, because a lot of that does come down. I know it's a lot about the actual production, but for me, like it is a source of inspiration, feeling like, oh man, this is starting to hit hard as I'm going. So I'd say I do probably 90%, maybe that's more, maybe it's more like 80% of the mixing as I'm going. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Probably the same way. Like for me, I have to, like the sounds themselves are like inspiring me to keep going. Like if it's going to sound like dry and dead as I keep writing out, I'm probably just going to lose interest. And so It's like, I have to make that snare sound awesome to motivate me to like, create other sounds and keep it going.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, man, I don't want to take any more of your time. I appreciate you so much for coming on, taking time to do this.
Absolutely.
I think it will help a lot of people who are interested in creating music and producing and composing. And what are your future plans with Evening Traveler, with your cinematic stuff?
Yeah. So I have an instrumental album coming out either end of this month or beginning of next month. It's like 99% done. And I'm really excited about this one because it feels like it's a little bit different than what I've done in the past. And so I have that on the way. And it's been a while since I've released instrumental stuff too. So I'm excited about that. And then I also have, I have 2 more, electronic pop Evening Traveler songs that I have done and I have submitted to Artlist. I'm actually doing like they're acting as like the label for this. So they'll decide when it gets released. So I have no idea when that's going to come out. They come out sometime in the future, and I'm excited about those too. So yeah,
awesome. Well, where's the best place for people to follow kind of what you're doing? Is Instagram the best place, or is there somewhere else that you?
Yeah, I think Instagram's the primary place that I stay updated on. I have my website joshleakmusic.com that has everything, but I'm not regularly updating that all the time. If you want to stay in touch with what I'm doing often, it's usually Instagram.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks so much again, man. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview today with Josh. Huge thanks to Josh for coming on the show. I hope you learned something, and make sure you go check out his music on Spotify or YouTube and check out what he's doing. It's really good stuff, and I appreciate him for being on. Before we leave for the day, make sure you get that cheat sheet. It's free if you're just getting started. thestudioarchive.co/cheat sheet. And yeah, let's see. I guess that's everything. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. Be kind of boring without you. So I will catch you in the next episode.